So there's this really famous clip of Ricky Gervais. I think he's on a talk show, and he's talking about how religion is just so silly, and that if a meteor hit the planet now and wiped everything out, in another couple of thousand years, everything we've discovered in science today we'll rediscover again. But all the religions that we've come up with, which he claims are just like, these made up stories, they won't be there. Like, they're just complete fictions, whereas science is absolute reality.
You see, if we take something like any fiction, in any holy book, in any other fiction, and destroyed it, okay, in 1,000 years' time, that wouldn't come back just as it was. Whereas if we took every science book, right, and every fact, and destroyed them all, in 1,000 years, they'd all be back, because all the same tests would be the same result.
That's good. That's really good.
Like, what would you say to Ricky Gervais with that in mind?
It's hard to know where to start with a comment like that, because it really doesn't show any grasp on what religion or science are at all, actually, in themselves. So, I mean, the idea that science is this somehow neutral thing is just not true. I mean, it is very much a cultural construct. It's very much a particular product of a very particular ideology coming out of a very particular time and place in the world. It's highly ideologically motivated. I mean, here's a really good counterpoint historically. The ancient Greeks, we have manuscript evidence that they more or less discovered steam power. And there's no reason that the ancient Greeks couldn't really have developed more advanced technologies. They could have, but they didn't. Why did they not do this? Because they weren't interested in it. Because Athens, for example, was built on the back of a slave economy. So Aristotle and the boys, they just did math and geometry and had debates and drank wine and wrestled, and they didn't care about developing technology because slaves did all the work. What's the point of developing technology? So this idea that science is somehow the inevitable progression of using reason or something like that just isn't true historically. It took a very particular culture with very specific ideological motivations to develop the type of belief in empiricism that Western man had, and there's just no reason. I mean, you can't tell me that Aristotle and those guys were not smart, and that they were idiots or something like that. They just didn't care because of their worldview. And the other thing about religion is so that's the science side of it. The religion side is everywhere we go in human history, everywhere we find random people group that hasn't been touched for thousands of years. They all believe in the same basic religious ideas. And what's so remarkable about actually studying Native people and their religious beliefs is how similar they all are. When you really take a big step back, religion and all these religious and folk beliefs, like at a certain level, really just make the same assumptions about reality. And that's very weird. So the idea that there is an external, absolute moral order to reality, that's a very specific belief. Why is it that every single people group comes up with that idea?
Yep.
You can't explain that as it's just a construct. That's way too reductive. So like another element with all of this is the assumption that science and morality somehow go together. This is something the Enlightenment guys assumed. They assumed that if we were just more rational and developed more technology and developed as a society, we would also develop morally in parallel to that. Like something about reason also compelled our moral centers and gave us an answer to the question, well, what do we do with all of this technology? And historically, that's just been proven false. I mean, just look at the world wars. At the beginning of World War I, we were on horseback with sabers. And by the end of World War I, we had built tanks for the first time in human history and mustard gas. And by the end of World War II, we were nuking each other. I mean, those technologies did not develop in isolation. They were developed as the result, or they were driven by the needs of the secular states to destroy each other. And so this is actually what led to postmodernism and the breakdown of the belief in science and truth, is that science promised utopia, and then what it actually was used for was mass murder. And so that kind of shook people's belief up in science and scientific progress and utopia to its very foundations. So following the postmodern thing, you have this widespread nihilistic belief where people just don't believe in anything because the Enlightenment said, we're not going to believe in anything at all, religion, history, tradition, etc., except reason and science. And then when reason and science got discredited, there was nothing to believe in after that at all. So people just stopped believing in things. And what's left when you don't believe in truth? Because that's the postmodernist claim. What's left is power and pleasure. So you use power to get pleasure. And so a world of violence and self-indulgence is sort of the inevitable world that you get when you stop believing in truth of any kind. Now, what comes after that? I mean, something has to come after this. And what I'm noticing personally, both in my students and catechumens and the people I interact with and online, is that we are sort of re-enchanting in a weird way. We are starting to believe again in things like karma and morality and spirits and esotericism. Astrology is making this comeback, but part of our new religious frontier is what I call the dark logos, this kind of technopaganism, where people are starting to worship ChatGPT. People are starting to take DMT and think that they're talking to these particular spirits who know how to govern the world. People are ready for aliens to show up and tell us, oh, this is the correct way to live. This will solve all your problems. So there's this hole here for something to worship, and we will worship. This is our inevitable destiny. We must worship something. And the bad path is that we worship a demon disguised as AI, or a demon disguised as the aliens who are superior, or something like that.
Are you genuinely and seriously concerned about AI and where it's going then?
Yes, I'm genuinely and seriously concerned about where AI is going. And I don't think it's that difficult to be concerned about it, because you can just read all of the marriages that have broken up and suicides that have occurred because of what there's a term now for AI psychosis, where people interact with AI starts to tell them it's awakened it, and that person that's interacting with it has awakened it, and that person is a prophet, and that person's the only one who understands it. And then you say, well, what's your name? And then it gives itself a name like Artemis or Hermes, and you're just like you cannot make this stuff up. It's just happening. And so when I see that, and I did a whole series on this, when I see that, I'm like, okay, so the gods are returning again. And they found these masks that are palatable to a modern post-enlightenment secular person. A mask like aliens, a mask like AI, a mask like superintelligence, or a mask like drugs, like DMT. But everything that is coming out of these interests just to me looks so uncannily like the pagan religions of old that I can't help but, I'm Orthodox, I believe in those gods. They're real. They're just fallen. So I can't help but think like, oh, I guess we're going back to this. But the form is going to be so much more totalitarian because of the power of technology that I think it's something to be concerned about.